Well, hello everyone here, there, and everywhere. Welcome to Winning Ways. I am your host, Stephannie Solomon. Thank you for stopping through. Oh, I'm excited about tonight because I'm not just looking at the camera, I'm looking at another human being. Oh my God, I have a guest on tonight. Well, you know, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And for the last few years, I've always had guests on for mental health awareness. Mental health awareness is very dear to my heart, dear to my heart. And I'm telling you, it's getting every year, well, the last few years, I'll say the last two, it's been getting tougher and tougher to get professional clinicians to commit because since the pandemic, they're in demand. They're in demand. But professional clinicians are not the only ones who can talk about mental health awareness. Before I introduce you, though, to our guest for this day. I do want to give a shout out to those of you who have been DMing me and emailing me and letting me know how blessed you are and how blessed you've been by the topics. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Miss Phyllis, I want to say thank you so much. You just stayed with us last week and I just should have brought you on the show. That's what I should have done. But thank you so much, Phyllis, for sharing. And thank you so much for being a part of the comments. So, folks, when you jump on, holler out, give your name, put your name in the comments, where you're not on a watch list or anything like that, but comment and let us know who you are. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let us know that you are really feeling what's going on here. Okay. All right. And to share. Well, I'm not going to belabor things. I have my guest on and she is here. There she is. There she is. Hi, Miss Reverend. I'm going to give you your dues. Reverend Andrea Young. Yes, yes, yes. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Good evening, Sister Stephannie. Can you hear me?
I hear you. I hear you well. Yes.
Good evening.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, everyone, this is Reverend Andrea Young. She is an ordained uh, minister at associate minister. I'm sorry, at the New Psalmist Baptist Church. She's held several leadership roles with the prison ministry, discipleship. She's led women's ministry, youth. Oh my God, she's done a lot. She's also an attorney, a doting mother, a devoted wife, and so much more. And what I've done, because her bio is full and it is lengthy, I have put her bio, okay, for those of you who definitely want to see it, I have put her bio in the chat. The link is in the chat, so you can feel free to go and check her out, okay, as well as in the description. All right. All right, we're going to get right to it. We're talking about mental health among the clergy and other Christian leaders, because you don't have to be a minister of the gospel to be a Christian leader. All right. So we want to talk about the stigmas that are attached to mental health. Well, first of all, let's make sure everyone is on the same page with what we mean when we say mental health, because there's a term mental illness, there's a term mental wellness, and sometimes they're used interchangeably. So why don't we just look at what I'm going to move this here if I can. There we go. Oops, bear with me, guys. Oh, that doesn't want to leave. Let's see if we can. And add that. All right, so let's look at here. Mental health awareness, what it really does involve. It involves our mental well-being, as well as our psychological, rather, our social well-being, and our emotional well-being. It deals with coping skills and cognitive function, the way we think, the way we assess our surroundings, our life, and what have you. I'm not going to get too deep tonight. But so when we're talking about our health, we're really talking about our well being. We were talking pre show, Reverend Andrea, and we were talking about a variety of things. Um, this is a conversation that can go on for days. It could be, oh my God, a workshop, for days because there's so many moving parts to it. But let's just deal with one aspect with the Christian leadership. Do you think that the stigmas that surround um, mental health impact negatively the perceptions that people have of clergy sometimes or Christian leaders?
First, Stephanie, let me thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you and to share with the viewers tonight. Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this conversation, and I count it an honor and a privilege. And then let me put a disclaimer out there. I am not a pastor, nor am I an expert in the area of mental health or have any level of expertise in the healthcare profession. I'm an attorney by trade, 20 plus years, but I'm also a called out servant who has been serving and ministering within the local church since I can remember. I was licensed in 1995 by my then pastor, Walter Scott Thomas Sr., now Bishop, our Bishop, Walter Scott Thomas Sr. So I pray, and then in on September the 11th, 2020, during the pandemic, I was ordained. So I pray that from my humble experiences, Stephannie, and testimony from serving in the local church, that what I share tonight will be a benefit to the viewers. When we talk about the stigmas surrounding mental health within the religious community, and the negative impact of those quote unquote stigmas, I am a Gen Z. So I was born in the late 1960s. And growing up, mental health and any stigma surrounding mental health was never a topic. I don't know about you, but I never heard my parents or anyone in the community talk about mental illness or mental health. If you were struggling in any area of life, our community raised the importance of prayer, and having a close relationship or a close walk with God. So by and large, I believe one of the stigmas in mental health, at least in the Black community back in the day, was having a child with an abnormality. But that stigma back in the day was sheltered in the Black community because you didn't hear about it. It wasn't put out there in the community. It wasn't highlighted. If we saw it, it was not associated with the term that we use now, mental health, and we didn't ascribe to it. And so when we view the stigma today of mental health, maybe as a sign of weakness or negative in the sense that it looks like there's a lack of faith, I think that is a total misconception.
Yeah.
On the contrary, we find in the word, now I'm a preacher, so I have to go to the word in the book of Psalms, where David struggled.
Yeah.
David struggled with his own mental health issues, with
Yeah.
depression and anxiety. We
Mm.
see him running from Saul. We see him struggling with the death of his newborn and then escaping from his enemies. And David often prayed and he meditated on God's word and he even encouraged himself, right? He was open and David was transparent. So there's something I believe to be said about the power of transparency in breaking whatever stigma there is, this misconception, to speak about it, to admit it, even as a leader, that I've got issues that I need to deal with, that I need to talk to someone, talk to a professional about. So I would, Stephanie, discount the notion of there being a stigma surrounding mental health within the religious community. It should never, I believe, be looked upon as a weakness in our faith or turning away from God, but more so a running to God. I don't mean to preach tonight, but I think it should be a running to God.
Yeah.
I think I can speak for all churchgoers and parishioners, at least in my church, that Sunday morning worship for me is a good dose of therapy. It's a good dose of
Mhm.
therapy.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You mentioned something too. You talked about a sign of weakness. This is just, and I asked you, knowing that this is not your uh, profession, but you've worked in ministry long enough to have witnessed in your own walk, your own journey, I'm sure, bouts of maybe depression, whether it was long, a stint, or short, because we all have those moments, anxiety, or what have you. Um, Fear, we're not supposed to have it, but let's be honest, we do.
Mhm.
Now what we do with it is something different.
Right.
I think that to even admit I'm scared, you know, I'm doubtful, I know that God is able, but, I'm shaking. Or wait a minute, I talked to someone and I need medication and I'm a child of God,
Right.
you know. Um, the fear of exposing that to show that we're regular people. Christian leaders are regular people. I think that what has contributed to a lack of transparency on our end is ignorance, lack of knowledge on everyone's part for the subject matter. Because as soon as you say mental people, because I can remember a slang when somebody told you, oh, she went mental on them.
Uh-huh.
So you know that means cray cray, right? So it's the worst, it's the most negative thing. But I think that our expectations of Christian leaders is we say that we shouldn't put them Christian leaders on a pedestal, and we shouldn't um, put them in a position of thinking that they're better than others, but we do. We expect them to be able to handle
Mhm.
certain instances. We expect that. And because people expect that of Christian leaders, I think sometimes, oftentimes, I'll hazard to say that Christian leaders take that on.
Mhm.
They're expecting me to be present. They're
Mhm.
expecting me to be there. They're expecting me to have a word when you don't.
But I do believe that there is a turning point.
Mhm.
The whole notion of self-care, we're hearing it more and more. Do you agree?
I agree.
We're hearing the notion, the concept of self-care, the discipline of self-care more and more. And it's becoming more and more important to the Christian leader because, just like you said, stress can affect the mind, the body, and the spirit. We know this because at some point it's affected us mentally within our bodies and spiritually. And so it's important to understand, I believe, that it's okay to care for oneself and not feel some kind of a way about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scripture talks about the importance of rest. Uh,
Mm.
3:5, third chapter, fifth verse says, I lie down to sleep. I wake again, and the Lord sustains me, for the Lord sustains me. And then Matthew, the 11th chapter, 28th verse says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Even
Right.
Jesus took the time to rest on the
Mm.
back of a boat in the midst of a storm.
I had someone ask me though, what does rest look like?
Mhm.
Especially if, and that's a legitimate question. As a former educator, right before it was time, the observation, we call it, before every observation, we had to have what's called a pre-op,
Mhm.
where your superior or your content leader would talk to you about what you're going to present, blah, blah. And whenever we shared what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, one of the questions would be, what would that look like?
Yeah, yeah.
So I started to transfer that question over into other areas of my life,
Mhm.
whatever it was. And with this whole mental health thing, when someone asked me and they said, rest, what does that look? And I said, that makes so much sense. We often tell people to do things like let it go,
Mhm.
get over it. How? What does it look like?
And
So for rest, what does rest look like, especially to people who define themselves by being busy? What does rest look like? Is it always laying down?
no, I think it looks different to different people. You know, your moments of rest are could be different from
Mhm.
what I consider rest. I was reading a book recently about the grace of God and the grace that He gives us. Um, he told Paul that my grace is sufficient for you. But a lot of times we don't accept the grace.
Hmm.
Sometimes we have a deficiency in our grace. And then the author lists a number of ways that gift of grace can show up, and it deals with self-care. So we have the grace of a weekly Sabbath. Your
Hmm.
rest could be taking time to center yourself, to take a Sabbath, to collect your thoughts, to collect your positive energy, to get more sleep, to exercise, to fellowship with others. Your rest could be, or my rest could be, setting boundaries, right?
Hmm.
Knowing my limits,
Yeah.
setting those boundaries, and of utmost important, quiet time in prayer, Stephannie, through meditation on scripture and reflection. Without, I believe, the discipline of self care, because it is a discipline, we
Mhm.
risk the silent killer. We
Which
risk,
is,
we risk being burnt out. We risk being broke down and having health complications and implications. And so the takeaway for me is I can't pour out what I don't take time to pour in.
yeah, yeah.
Taking time away in prayer, in meditation, in reflection, knowing that I have to set boundaries, set some limits, and knowing, and we hear this all the time, but knowing that it's okay to say no
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah,
and to stick with it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That whole boundaries, saying no, that's new for a lot of people. Um, Even if they are adults, that's new for them. Even if they're grandparents,
Yeah.
that's new. Like you said, you're Gen Z, I'm a baby boomer. We
Mhm.
never heard this kind of talk growing up. So you have people who are parents, grandparents hearing this. And I'll say this, as a life coach, I get more questions from Gen Zs and baby boomers about mental health, but not commitments.
Mm.
I get inquiries, but I don't get commitments. And during the consultation, I feel it. They have not availed themselves to that place and that point. It's like, I'll be okay, but I know I'm not okay. But I can't let you know I'm okay because I'm not sure I want to admit I'm not okay. Does that make sense? But then we had the millennials and the Gen Y. Is that what it is? The next one? They have no, wait a minute. They're the Gen X. No,
Don't look.
hold up.
Don't start me lying.
You're Gen
See
X.
that
You know what? I just thought about that.
I'm
You're Gen X. Then it's the millennials and the Gen Zs. That's what it is. Okay. So the Gen Zs and the millennials, not only will they reach out, they are eager. They are eager to find out what's wrong with me. How can I make this better? What are my options? What do you have for me? How can you help me? I need support. That's the one word I hear a lot. They use that word frequently. I need support. And I'm saying to myself, we never talk like this.
So, as Christian leaders, I think we have to be intentional about our own self care. But then, as I see some young adults, my daughter used the phrase once, "How is your mental?"
Mm, wow.
Sometimes for us, it's just a matter of reaching out to our young people because we do know that mental health and this country is facing a mental health crisis, specifically among our young people. We have
Mhm.
to be intentional about reaching out to them, asking them, how is your mental? But then again, also not allowing other people to make us feel some kind of a way, the Christian leader, when we take care of our own mental health.
Stepping back. Now that's a big one. When a Christian, I've seen that. When a Christian says, I'm stepping back or I'm changing not gears, but changing direction,
Mhm.
that's often questioned by the same community that he or she is a part of because I think it's unfamiliar, when we're not used to seeing that. And like you said earlier, talking to the young people, asking them, my thing is, how can you ask something you don't know how to ask? You don't know how to frame that question yourself because you're not comfortable yourself.
I think there comes a time, Stephannie, for every leader to thoughtfully readjust to life changes.
Mm.
As we age, as responsibilities mount, as families grow and problems multiply, and as our energy levels diminish, we have to be honest with ourselves, and say to ourselves, I mean, I say to myself all the time, I am not the same youthful person,
Mhm.
youthful minister that I was 20 plus years ago. My
Wow.
family responsibilities, my professional responsibilities, my energy levels have all shifted. Now, do I continue to serve? Absolutely.
Mhm.
It's what I do.
Yeah.
It's in our DNA as Christian leaders.
Mhm.
Maybe I have to readjust at this point. It reminds me of a perfect example. My daughter, she ran track and field for 8 years, and she was a sprinter. She was like at the top of her game. Angel loves sprinting, but she hated long distance running. And every now and then, her coach would tell her, "You have to run that 400." And but she hated it because she would have to start out sprinting, but then slow it down and pace herself so that she would have the energy to finish. So, Stephannie, every now and then, at some point, Christian leaders, we may find ourselves having to slow down and pace ourselves
Mm.
in the race.
So I'm hearing pacing, I'm hearing rest, I'm
Mhm.
hearing boundaries. Hmm. And no is a real word, folks. It's a real word. Hi, Soror Cynthia. Thank you for stopping through. Thank you so much for letting us know you are enjoying this conversation. We're going to be right back with more with Reverend Andrea and all she has to say. Stay with us. Not going far.
Hey, Scholar, whose book are you reading now?
I'm enjoying a great reading by Stephannie Solomon. Her conversational writing style, disciple-centric themes, and liberal approach to topics is such a blessing to me. She's so on point.
Wow, she sounds like someone I want to hear, and her books like something I need to share with my book club.
You know, her books are accessible through all electronic mediums and at the brick-and-mortar booksellers, and you can hear her on her weekly blog talk radio show.
I take it she's on Twitter and other social networks?
Yes, and she's funny, too.
Sounds like the author and her books have great personality. I'll be getting my copies today.
Hey, 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 welcome back. Welcome back. You are tuned into Winning Ways with yours truly, the host. And today I have a guest, Reverend Andrea Young, and we're talking about mental health among the clergy and Christian leadership. Feel free to jump in and join in if you dare. Before the break, Reverend Andrea, you were talking about rest, boundaries, just finding a way for each person. What I got from what you said, to individually tailor what self-care means for them, because really mental health is just that. We are in an age, and we have been for decades, of taking care of the body, what that looks like. But we're more than just the body. We're mind, soul, spirit, and body. And I think this calls for an awareness. And oftentimes we're not fully aware of ourselves and all that encompasses us. We're complex beings, fearfully and wonderfully made. Yes, we are.
The complex.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think that sometimes as Christian leaders, if we are not careful, uh, as much as we say we love and trust God, we don't trust Him with us totally, because if we do, we'll see that we really are frail. Our mind is not our own, and we can't listen to every thought, and we should feel our feelings, but we shouldn't let them lead us. And if we're honest, we do sometimes let our feelings lead us. And we listen to thoughts that we shouldn't listen to. And that takes us on that spectrum of mental health that can go into mental illnesses. There are levels to this. So I think that all of us should be cognizant of who we are and our limitations.
Right.
And knowing our limitations, we ought to be aware of our weaknesses, our strengths. And you said something earlier before the break. Don't be too old, too stuck, too traditional, too conventional in any way to not pivot. If anything, I think the pandemic taught us in business, with our everyday lives, if we wanted to not just survive, but thrive, we had to figure some things out, how to do things differently, to not just survive, but to thrive. And that was a pivot. And I think it's not too late for anyone, no matter how long they've been doing what they've been doing, because I hear that a lot, especially in the church world. We've been doing it this way and I've learned that statement usually is for the person who's saying it.
Right.
They don't want to get out of that comfort zone. They don't want to try something new or different, and they don't want to challenge themselves out of fear.
Right.
And I think fear will take us into some mental health challenging spots if we're not careful, like anxiety. I didn't realize that, because I thought anxiety looked a certain way. Just like when people hear mental health and think of cray cray, we have this thing in our mind of what that looks like. And I remember I thought anxiety looked like someone was physically, shaken and out of sorts. And when I was told that some ailments that I was having physically, every time I went to the hospital doctor, emergency room, I'm talking emergency room here, could never find anything. And I just thought the enemy was playing a trick on me. I know what I'm feeling. I'm giving all these symptoms. And they're like, Miss Solomon, we've run every test possible. You're in good health. And this would make me cry. I cried 3 times at 3 events. The doctor said, do you have anyone to talk to? At that point, I was like, oh my God. Oh, they think so. They think I'm making this up. They think, oh my God, I never forget. I just went whatever. And I had to say to myself, what is going on in your life when this encounter or episode happens physically? What's going on? And I had to be brave enough to question myself, to look inwardly, and to reflect. And I did research along with, medical assistance, and it was stress related.
Right.
But I was looking cool on the outside.
That also says that sometimes the therapist needs therapy.
There we go.
A therapist who works out and impartation to others needs to be poured into, needs someone to talk to.
Absolutely.
Can't underestimate the value in therapy,
Oh,
in finding someone, having someone, um, the value in sitting on someone's couch and talking.
now that's not always been, and I don't know. I just in different circles, some I think I'm seeing more, at least it sounds like it anyway, that there are more Christian leaders embracing that. I don't know if I want to call it that science or that aspect. It takes nothing. I don't think it should not compete with our faith,
Of course.
and it takes nothing away from the faith. I think we talked about stereotypes earlier and stigmas. I think that's one. Well, if you're getting therapy, then that means you're not believing in God. Well, but wait a minute. God uses physicians, he uses lawyers, he uses accountants, he uses all these other people. He can't use therapists,
Right.
So I think those are some stigmas that we have to eradicate as well. I noticed that on your bio that you were a part of the prison ministry. So was I.
When I first started in ministry, me and my husband, that was our um, first stretch in ministry, prison ministry, and it was large.
Hmm.
At New Psalmist Baptist Church.
Yeah. Were there any stressors with that? I remember when we would go out to Jessup and visit the women, and there were some stressors for me, and we were told to get it together, hold it together. For me, the stressors, looking at, whoa, that could have been me, and all, just the lives of these
Yeah,
individuals, and
just
then they would look. I'm sorry.
just the stressors of being in that environment.
Hmm.
I'm sure
Yeah.
brought on some anxiety. And yes, Sister Kathy, Sister Parker, we can have Jesus as our therapist. Talk to
Yes.
Jesus.
And a
Yes,
therapist. You can
yes,
have both.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
it's important for us to understand that some stressors in our lives can be caused by other people, right?
Mm.
Loss, sometimes our children, sometimes our spouses, while there are other instances in which we cause our own stress.
Yes.
You mentioned that fear, and I want to say that it was Bishop Walter Scott Thomas Sr. who helped us with that fear component recently in one of the
Yes.
sermons where he
Yes.
talked about fear is trying to figure out what's going to happen in the future that hasn't even happened. It's that anxiety we create in our own minds of what could happen that hasn't happened and probably won't happen. So
Yes.
sometimes we stress our own selves out. And I think that's why, again, it goes back to that whole self care piece, reflecting on the Word of God, Sister Parker, staying in constant prayer,
Mhm.
setting those boundaries, and simply recognizing that we do have certain limitations. If I could share my testimony, about nine
Please
months,
do.
thank you, about 9 months ago, you had heard about it because you were a part of the team, but you
Yeah.
didn't know the
Yeah.
details.
Right.
9 months ago, you and I were working on our women's conference, our women's ministry conference, and I was the lead facilitator in it. But I was doing other things. Again, we talked about how as life goes on, you have other responsibilities. Some of those responsibilities you take on yourself. Other responsibilities come with the playing field, family, right?
Mhm.
Uh, a job, and then there's ministry. And it was during the hot months of, I think it was July or August, where I was going. And in women's ministry, we were constantly talking about self care. We
Yeah.
had cafe conversations
I just said, yeah, just said,
on
sure
self
did.
care.
Sure did. Sure
But
did.
I was constantly going to one day, my 16-year-old daughter found me knocked out cold on
Mm.
the bathroom floor.
Mm.
I had went unconscious. I was cold. And she handled it in a remarkable way. When I came to, actually, I heard her praying over me.
Oh my.
911 was called. I was hospitalized, but I had become stressed out and dehydrated. That was my diagnosis. Stress and dehydration, not taking care of myself. And I think what we fail to realize is that the trauma of the lack of self-care, that trauma not only affects us, but it affects our loved ones.
Mm, mm, mm.
Because even today, my daughter, and she's the youngest, she still talks about that. And
That was
she's still always concerned about her mother, me, taking care of myself and not running all the time. Sometimes she'll tell me, Mom, you need to go and sit down somewhere.
she wants you around.
She wants to sit down.
That was traumatic for her.
Yeah.
Yes, finding you like that. And we may not know for a while until she feels comfortable to fully articulate it without feeling some kind of way of what that did to her. That leads into one of the things you kind of covered it. Should the potential impact of trauma and crisis, on the mental health be concerning? Absolutely, because you said, oh, look at the impact on our family members.
Right.
You know?
It should be. Mm-hmm.
Even on those who we lead, I think, because they're always watching. As an educator, one of the things the children were always watching. If you ever asked them to mimic one of the adults in the building, they would have it down to a science. They knew every little. Miss Solomon, you hold your mouth like this, and when you get mad, you do this. They knew every little thing about us. Our people who we lead watch everything we do.
Yes, they do.
So if they see us not resting, being Superman, Superwoman, not taking off the cape ever, we're really teaching them by the way we model that this is how you do this. So it just begets and begets and begets, this unhealthiness mindset. It just sounds like to me, as the more we're talking, it's about pivoting with a different mindset.
Pivoting with a different mindset.
And it's ongoing.
Another author, Peter Scazzaro, has a book entitled The Emotional Healthy Leader. We heard about the emotional healthy church. This one is the emotional healthy leader. And it addresses his conversion as a leader from emotional blindness to emotional health, which he himself encountered when he realized that the church was an exciting place to be, but there was no longer any joy in ministry leadership.
Oh,
no longer any joy because there was an endless cycle of responsibilities that really left him empty. It left him with little energy to appreciate time with his family. And it literally left him, Stephannie, with the question, am I supposed to be miserable and pressured so that other people can experience the joy in God?
Wow.
So while the Christian leader, the author, was miserable and experiencing pressure, other people in the church was experiencing the joy of God, but his family was also suffering. And so, he was only 30 years old at the time.
My, that's young.
So it wasn't until he dealt with that link between emotional health and spiritual maturity that he was able to change the way he did life and ministry at the same time. And again, the main takeaway, I believe, to our conversation tonight is the role of self-care. How self-care, even with having to pivot, and where we are in life, how self-care plays a major role for the Christian leader.
So we don't have to take on these weights. We don't have to be superhuman, Superman, and Superwoman,
Right. We don't.
Yeah, we're not God. There's so much more to discuss, but I like where this has left room for people to reflect and to think, because mental health is self-care. It is
Yes.
self-awareness. It's self-care. So you become aware, I cannot do this anymore, or I can't do things this way, or I must find joy and keep joy by finding a whole nother approach to this. It's
Mhm.
continual discovery. So this conversation is one I believe to be had over and over and over again. Reverend Andrea, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me. I so appreciate
Yeah, and sharing your take on it. You bring experience to the table, and experience to the table, there's definitely room for conversation about this topic. All right. Thank you so very much. Very
Thank
much. I
you.
want the listeners to know that Reverend Andrea, has a Facebook group, and she comes on every Monday at 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook with a moment to center. You want to share a little bit about that?
So, A Moment to Center was birthed in 2021. It's just a few moments of centering ourselves in the Word of God. First, second, and third Mondays of each month. You can come and join us in the room uh, every first, second, and third Monday on our Facebook page at A Moment to Center. And I'm so excited because you'll be joining us. I pray that you'll still be joining us this coming Monday, where we'll delve more into, you'll delve more into the self care of the soul.
Yeah.
All right, is
Yeah.
self
Yeah.
care of the soul. So I'm
Yeah.
looking so forward to your conversation, your
Oh,
moments with us on next Monday.
I am looking forward to being there. Yes, I am. And I want to say to those of you out there are thinking about maybe getting a session or two with me, feel free to log on to www.stephaniebooks.com. It should be scrolling across the screen. There it is. Yes, and the life coaching session is with Evolve for Life. My niches are in forgiveness, family relationships, and personal development. Not an expert, but I'll share with you what I know, and hope and pray and support you through your journey to be your better self. Well, Lord willing, this has been great. Lord willing, I'll be back here again next week doing the same thing, folks. The same thing, talking about mental health until the month is over. Well, everyone, take care. Have a great week. All right. All right. And don't forget to subscribe on that YouTube channel. Looking forward to seeing you there.